Audience discretion is advised due to potentially distressing and sensitive material. Hi everyone and welcome to Crime Alley Documentaries. Before we start, we just want to thank you for subscribing to our channel, but we have noticed that many that view our shorts and videos haven't actually subscribed, and we ask you to please do so and help us through this journey of doing what we love and bringing awareness to people. Remember, it's free and you can always undo it. Thank you so much. Also, don't forget to like the video and leave us a comment. Now let's start with today's case. David Parker Ray was born on November 6, 1939 in Belen, New Mexico, to father Cecil Ray, a mechanic, and mother Nettie Parker. Ray came from a very poor family, and due to this poor financial condition, he and his younger sister Peggy Pearl Ray were forced to move in with their mother's parents, who were extremely strict. Now, their grandparents lived on a ranch and the parents didn't visit their two children on a regular basis, which in my opinion was extremely detrimental to the children's self-esteem and sense of self. And when their father Cecil did visit, he was usually drunk and violent and would even go as far as giving his son sadomasochistic pornography magazines. Yeah, he was not the greatest father or role model. On top of all this turmoil in his life, David did poorly in school and was also bullied mercilessly because he was unusually shy when it came to girls, which made him turn to drugs and alcohol at a pretty young age. At the same time, Ray also entered his teenage years, and when all this is put together, it is the perfect recipe for disaster, right? Imagine being bullied because of girls on one hand, and on the other hand being supplied with violent pornography by your drunk dad. Well, I'm just gonna let you think about that for a second. Well, anyway, all this resulted in him starting to fantasize about raping and torturing and even murdering women, and he would even draw pictures that depicted his fantasies, which one day Peggy, his sister, saw by accident and decided not to have anything to do with his brother from then on, which made the siblings become estranged later on in life. This was made easy after their grandmother passed away and the two were split up. After finishing high school, David joined the army, which included working as a general mechanic. However, he was honorably discharged and he would spend the rest of his days working as a maintenance man for the New Mexico Parks Department in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico. Ray got married 4 times, all of which ended in divorce, and he also had 2 children. Later on, he met Cindy Handy, a 37-year-old state park worker in New Mexico who was trying to duck convictions on grand theft and drug charges in Washington state. It is believed that he began assaulting women as an adolescent because of a statement he made saying, quote, "I've been raping bitches ever since I was old enough to jerk off and tie little girls' hands behind their backs." End quote. Though this is not the darkest secret Ray had and what you're here to hear about. Ray had a torture room, which he called the toy box. Yes, you heard that right, and yes, it is as disturbing as you think. This was a repurposed soundproof cargo trailer located just outside his New Mexico property, and in it he had whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, leg spread bars, surgical blades, shock machines, and saws, all of which were used to terrorize women for years. In addition, he also had sex toys, torture implants, syringes, detailed diagrams showing how to inflict pain, and a homemade electrical generator to electrocute his victims. It is believed that Ray spent $100,000 on his toy box and all his toys. If this is not disturbing enough and chilling to the bone, Ray also constructed elaborate contraptions to confine his victims, like a fur-lined coffin and locks and chains to stop them from escaping. Now, the next part is the most troubling part of it to me. There was a mirror mounted on the ceiling above a gynecology table to which he strapped the victims so that they could see everything that was being done to them. He wanted them to see themselves being tortured and violated. He even had a wooden contraption that bent them over and immobilized them so that his dog and sometimes his friends could also rape the women. Ray had an audio tape recording of himself, which he played for the victims when they regained consciousness, which detailed how he was going to hurt them and what he was going to do to them. A part of the tape talked about how he was going to heavily drug them, then abandon them on the side of a road somewhere. A part of it says, quote, "I get off on mind games. After we get completely through with you, you're going to be drugged up heavily. They are hypnotic drugs that will make you extremely susceptible to hypnosis, auto-hypnosis, and hypnotic suggestion. You're going to be kept drugged a couple of days while I play with your mind. By the time I get through brainwashing you, you're not going to remember a fucking thing about this little adventure." Another chilling instance of what was on the tape is, quote, "Be smart and be a survivor. Don't ever scream. Don't talk without permission. Be very quiet, be docile and obedient, and by all means show proper respect. Have a nice day." End quote. Now, how, you may ask, his family didn't know about all that was going on, especially his girlfriend Cindy. Well, it turns out Ray had a couple of accomplices while on the hunt, one of whom was his girlfriend Cindy Handy, who even took part in the sexual abuse of the women, and they actually were told that they had to sexually satisfy her as well. Another one of his accomplices was none other than his daughter, Glenda Jean Ray, aka Jessie, who would help her dad abduct these women. One of his victims was 53-year-old Billy Ray Bowers, who disappeared from Phoenix, Arizona on September 25, 1988, and 3 days later the body of an unknown man wrapped in a blue tarp was found by a fisherman at McCrae Cove at Elephant Butte Lake in New Mexico. He was shot in the back of the head and there was no identification found on his body, though after dental record comparisons it was concluded that he was Billy Bowers, a co-owner of Canal Motors, a used car business that had employed Ray as a mechanic. It was a known fact that even though Ray was good at his job, he was often in conflict with Bowers. Another one of his victims was 22-year-old Jill Susan Troya, who was last seen at the Frontier restaurant during the late evening of September 30th, 1995. Before going to the restaurant, she went to a bar with her friends and then headed to the restaurant with her girlfriend, none other than Jessie Ray. They were reportedly seen having an argument, and Jill was never seen or heard of again. When the police interrogated Jessie, she told them that she'd left Jill at the restaurant and left with her father, Ray, although later on police found recordings of Ray detailing accounts of sexual torture and burial of a woman who fit Jill's descriptions. After his arrest, among his possessions was found a 2-page letter to an 18-year-old girl named Connie from an Australian man named Mark. According to Ray's journal, Connie had long blonde hair, a birthmark on her chest, and was 160 centimeters tall. She was abducted and murdered in December 1995. The Australian Federal Police and the FBI made tireless efforts to locate Mark in order to locate Connie's family and friends, but were unable to do so. In 1997, a homeless mother of two who was living in a tent she'd borrowed from Ray and was an acquaintance of Ray's through his daughter Jessie went missing. This was 22-year-old Sylvia Marie Parker. She was said to have been abducted by Ray, tortured for several days, and finally strangled to death. 2 years later, Cynthia Vigil was abducted from a parking lot by Ray and his girlfriend. She was taken to the toy box and tortured mercilessly. After 3 days of captivity, she escaped from the repurposed trailer on March 22nd. She waited for Ray to leave for work and then unlocked her chains with the key that Handy had by mistake left close enough for her to reach on a nearby table. Though Handy did notice what she was up to, and a fight broke out, where Handy broke a lamp over Vigil's head, but in return, Vigil successfully unlocked her chains and stabbed Handy in the neck with an ice pick. Vigil took this opportunity and ran from the house only wearing an iron slave collar and padlock chains. She headed down the road asking for help, where she spotted a mobile house where the homeowner took her in, gave her a rope, and called the police. This led officials to the trailer, and Ray and his girlfriend Handy were arrested, but both claimed that they'd abducted Vigil to try and get her off her heroin addiction. Although Vigil fully relayed what had happened to her during her captivity, she said that Ray treated her like a dog, forced her to eat on the floor while wearing a leash. He also bathed her like a dog and forced her to perform sexual acts for him and his accomplices. The most terrifying account was when she recounted how her captor forcefully inserted gravy into her vagina so that the dog would remove the contents against her will. After the news broke about what had been happening in this trailer of terror for years, another victim came forward with a similar story. Her name was Angelica Montano, and she claimed that she'd been held captive by Ray and Handy after she was invited in to get a cake mix from Handy. She was brutally raped and tortured, but successfully convinced the couple to let her go. Interestingly, and heartbreaking at the same time, she was picked up by an off-duty police officer and told him what had happened to her, believing that she would get some help and no one would ever have to go through this ever again. But he said that this all sounded unrealistic and over the top and just left her at a bus stop. She even called the police after experiencing such unprofessional approach, but there were no follow-ups on her case. Simply, no one believed her or even dropped by at the trailer to see if she was telling the truth. Unfortunately, there was also another victim that never came forward and was identified through the tapes that were in Ray's possession. After reviewing the tapes, police identified and located her alive and well, in a sense, in Colorado. They had identified her from a tattoo on her ankle. She explained that on the night in question, she had gotten into a fight with her husband and left the house to play pool with her friends. Her name was Kelly Garrett, and she knew Ray's daughter Jessie. Jessie took her to the Blue Water Saloon in Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, and it is said that she drugged her beer and then offered her a ride home, at which point she just dropped her off at her father's house, where Garrett went through days of torture and abuse before Ray drove her home and told her husband that he'd found her incoherent on a beach. Because she was heavily drugged, she had no idea where she'd been or what had happened to her, but her husband didn't believe her. And since she didn't know what to tell the police, she never contacted them. Because of this incident, her husband divorced her and she moved to Colorado, never knowing what took place that night. But imagine finding the police at your doorstep, telling you you've been tortured and raped for 2 days, and showing you videos of your ordeal. I mean, how would you even feel? I personally can't even imagine what my reaction would be or how I would feel. After being arrested, many things came to light that were of great interest to the investigators. Firstly, when his property was turned upside down, no human remains were found. However, there were clothes and jewelry found in his possession that may have been taken from his victims. Hundreds of photos were taken of the items found at his property, which you can still find online, that the police are hoping would help them identify the victims if their families ever saw the photos. Ray would kidnap 4 or 5 women a year and would hold them captive for approximately 2 to 3 months, but exactly how many victims he's claimed over the years is unknown. Law enforcement, however, believes that he's raped, tortured, and killed up to 60 people over the course of his life. The reason why takes us to our next point concerning the case. Ray allegedly said, quote, "The thing to do is cut them down the belly, scoop out their guts, fill the chest cavity with cement weights, and then use baling wire to wrap them up." End quote. Even his girlfriend Handy testified that he dismembered, buried, and dumped his victims in the Elephant Butte Lake. One example of this could be an El Paso resident who was fishing in the Elephant Butte Lake and found an 80-pound gunny sack filled with what he thought was animal flesh. He then suspected that it was human flesh and alerted the authorities, and they determined the gunny sack to contain human flesh but no organs or bones, which meant that the unidentified human was mutilated and dismembered before being dumped in the lake. Another fact that came to light was that Handy and Jesse, Ray's girlfriend and daughter, were not his only accomplices. Apparently, several of the women who he'd been dating at different times also helped him with abducting and torturing women. There was also Dennis Yancey, who strangled his own girlfriend under Ray's orders, a victim we've already talked about by the name of Sylvia Parker, the homeless mother of two. His three main accomplices, meaning Handy, Jesse, and Yancey, at one point or another talked to the authorities about Ray's crimes and asked them to arrest him, but they were dismissed for different reasons. This is just unbelievable. Jessie alleged that her father was abducting and torturing women and selling them to buyers in Mexico, but the police determined that the allegations were too non-specific and they couldn't arrest Ray. Yancey also took the police to the spot he and Ray had buried his girlfriend, but the body was not there, and Yancey concluded that Ray must have moved the body in case Yancey went all soft on him. Of course, after tearing his property and possessions apart, the police did find Ray's diary, in which he detailed all his torture and abuse of the women over the years and gave descriptions of their appearances. In addition, there were also tapes that supported the allegation that he was sexually abusing women, about which he stated, quote, "It was a source of entertainment for me to create these tapes. That's why there was a disclaimer at the beginning of the tape stating that it was for adult entertainment only." End quote. Now, given all of this, you think that everything will be taken into account and every single thing would point to Ray being a sick rapist. But no. The judge ruled that the cases of the three surviving victims, Cynthia Vigil, Angelica Montano, and Kelly Garrett, would be severed, meaning that each case would be presented separately. This would devastate the case against Ray, as they would have bolstered the other cases against him and would fill in the gaps. The judge also stated that a lot of the evidence found in his trailer, including the audio tapes in which he talked in detail about his torturing methods and rapes, could not be admitted in the Garrett and Montano cases. An example of why the judge decided that such evidence could not be admitted in court was that they couldn't prove that all the items that were listed as Ray's possessions, which had been retrieved from his trailer, were in his possession at the time of the alleged rapes and tortures. The judge also decided to postpone the trial in order to try Ray for a 1996 murder in Colorado, and shortly before or during the trial for the said crime, Angelica Montano died of a drug overdose, and she never testified to Ray's crimes. Ray's defense was that the toy box was part of the fantasy he'd had his whole life, and any sex was consensual.
I feel raped.
On that day, Ray admitted to us he had been involved with women but denied committing any crimes.
She enjoyed it?
Has he ever tortured anyone?
No.
Did he kidnap anyone?
No.
So did Ray ever do anything against the wishes of a sex partner?
No. I get my excitement from making a woman happy. My trailer had numerous sex toys in it of different types, all different fetishes. I got pleasure out of the woman getting pleasure. I did what they wanted me to do.
David.
Ray went to trial for his crimes against Kelly Garrett, which resulted in a mistrial due to the fact that two of the jurors found Garrett's story a little bit out there and unbelievable. Though after a retrial, Ray was convicted on all 12 counts. In November, a retrial began, and a few days into it, the judge passed away, and the proceedings couldn't continue until the coming April. This time, however, Ray ran out of luck, and a week into his trial for the crimes he'd committed against Vigil, he agreed to a plea bargain and was sentenced to 224 years in prison in 2001 for his numerous offenses against women. His plea deal concerned his daughter and for her to obtain leniency in her sentence. He allegedly admitted that the 53-year-old man who he'd shot in the back of the head and who he'd worked for was also an accomplice of his. His surviving accomplices were also sent to prison on different charges. Jessie was charged with kidnapping and criminal sexual penetration. She pled no contest and was sentenced to 30 months in prison with an additional 5 years to be served on probation, which I think could have been way more for sure. After all, she did drug and deliver the victims to her dad, being aware of what was gonna happen to them. Cindy Handy, who testified against Ray, received a sentence of 36 years. She was released in 2019. Again, I think this was too lenient after what her role was in all of this. Yancey was sentenced to 30 years in prison, charged with kidnapping, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit crime, and tampering with evidence, though the Rays were not charging Yancey's girlfriend's murder due to lack of sufficient evidence. It is believed that Ray's murder spree came to an end in March 1999 when he was 59. On May 28, 2002, Ray was transported to the Lee County Correctional Facility in Hobbs, New Mexico to be questioned by the state police, and he was apparently supposed to give them the locations of the bodies, but he died of a heart attack before the scheduled interrogation took place. He was 62, and with him died all the hope for finding the victims' bodies and bringing some solace to their friends and families. No bodies were ever found, no possible victims were identified, and no murder was officially linked to him. The FBI even launched a search looking for more potential victims, but none were ever found. So, as I said before, there are still hundreds of photos of the possessions of the potential victims online. So if you have been missing a loved one, I urge you to take a look at the pictures. Maybe this is the clue you need to answer your questions. Of course, we do wish that no one will ever find the belonging of their loved ones among the pictures. Our hearts truly go out to all the people that were affected by these heinous crimes.
My dad and his wife are a very big part of my life now. I look at his wife as my mom now. Life is a lot different now than it was then. I changed the dynamics of what my family was then to now. I would never put my kids through anything I went through. Yes, I've taught my kids to stay safe. I'm always pounding it in their head. Actually, they're a little overprotective of me. I think I've hovered over them so much in life that now my 13-year-old won't let me walk to the store by myself. He gets mad, like, go with mom, or sometimes they drive me nuts because I want to be by myself. And it seems like they got to be with me 24/7, except for when they're at school. I think a lot of people don't realize that there are a lot of people out there that are sick like him. People just need to be more aware of what's going on out there. I find it positive for me to talk about my story, especially when I'm doing outreach, to talk to the women about, hey, this happened to me. Try to change what you're doing. There's programs, there's a lot of things that could help a girl in that situation. So I'm just trying to make it more aware of It's not pretty out there. It's not glamorous. The money's not worth it. We try to tell them there's other ways to survive, go to program. There's a lot of places that help pay your rent. There's a lot of programs out there that help women. It's just getting these women to get in the programs. There are other ways to survive, a lot of other ways. He was actually convicted of all the counts against me, of torturing, raping, kidnapping. I can't remember all the charges, but it added up to over 200 years. From the day he got sentenced, it was about 3 months, and he got transferred to another prison when he died of a heart attack. When I found out that he had passed away, I was happy, but at the same time, I was really sad because the people that are missing their loved ones, like Jill Troya, Murray Parker, their bodies, who knows where they're at? He's the only one, and their families can't have him back yet. Cindy Handy plea bargained for 36 years. She's serving her prison term now, and she's eligible for parole in about 4 years. In this state, I think there's a big chance she'll get out. We have a problem with overcrowding in our jail and prison system, so if she didn't lose any good time or anything, I feel she'll get out. It terrifies me to death. Very scared, because I know what she's capable of.